up. Sergeant Carter had just come back from checking out the riverbanks. As he watched his men at work, he felt pride and affection for them. Wait a minute. He noticed that a certain soldier was missing again. Tyrone had gone walking along the water's edge. He came up on a couple ducks who were nesting on the bank, and he started talking to them.
Hey, little duckies. Don't you know there's a terrorist just waiting to gobble you up? Don't you worry about a thing. Uncle Ty promises to protect you and all the little critters around here.
He looked over and saw two turtles sunning themselves. He put them on his lap. They did not seem to be the least bit afraid of him.
Gosh, how come you critters aren't afraid of me?
Thought Tyrone. He wished he could stop being afraid. Well, if nothing else, he'd bring back some pretty shells for his mama. Later that day, Sergeant Carter went over all the details and strategies that they would be using to capture this invader, whoever he was. Something caught their attention. The men jumped up and pulled their guns out. Who was this stranger? Could it be the enemy?
Oh, hey, dudes. What's happening? Don't tell me you guys like to hang 10,
said the stranger. Private Runner addressed the young man.
Who are you and what are you doing here? Oh, hey, bro. The name's Reggie, and I come here a couple times a week to surf. I realize there ain't much current, but it's the closest thing to the coast we got,
he replied.
Well, go surf in your bathtub. You're on forbidden territory. We're here on a top-secret military assignment, and no outsiders are permitted. So beat it,
shouted Runner. About the time the surfer dude was out of sight, good old Tyrone was making his way back to camp. But he seemed to be getting nervous. He kept looking around. Private Bolin tried to get his attention.
Excuse me, did you lose something?
Tyrone kept glancing around.
No, I ain't lost nothing. I reckon I don't want to find nothing neither. Like what?
Asked Runner.
I don't want to get too close to the river after dark. I heard tell there's such a thing as swamp monsters, said
Tyrone. Runner and Bowler burst out laughing. This was too much. What would he come up with next? Tyrone didn't think it was so funny. Why did they have to make fun of him all the time? The Coast Guard had sent in water patrol units. They traveled the river looking for anything suspicious. He explained to Bolin and Livingston that everything seemed pretty normal. Livingston reminded the patrolman.
There's some water caverns up ahead on the right. It'd be a good idea to take a look in that cavern. That'd sure make a good hiding place for someone.
The patrolman nodded and went on ahead. A while later, out of nowhere, up came a scuba diver. He was as surprised to see the military as they were to see him. Sergeant Carter said,
Let me handle this.
He walked over to the diver.
What do you think you're doing here?
The diver shrugged his shoulders and said,
I'm diving for clams. Is there a law against that? It is when you're trespassing in unauthorized waters,
shouted Sergeant Carter. Scuba Man didn't seem too impressed with the sergeant.
Okay. So who knew?
Nightfall came and went. The men had been able to get a good night's rest and were still asleep in the early morning hours. Tyrone was up bright and early. He was feeling pretty good about himself. He thought about all the silly fears he'd had. No wonder the guys laughed at him. He was starting to laugh too. As he sat warming his tootsies by the fire, he thought I'm sure going to surprise the guys with breakfast when they wake up. He needed some extra firewood, so he started reaching down, picking up branches, when there it was, a red devil snake. Tyrone jumped up and down, screaming and running for the tent. The men jumped up, and one of them said,
Not again! Shoelaces, come down from there!
After that ordeal, Runner went off on his own. He decided if they were going to get something to eat, besides those military meals, he better get busy. He found a long stick, and he tied some twine to it, and he made a wire hook. And he started catching fish immediately. Wow, were the fish ever biting! What a breakfast this was going to be. Suddenly, something grabbed his pole right out of his hands.